All right, everybody. Well, now I have Fox 10 anchor John Hook up here with me. I've been teasing this story you told me yesterday all afternoon about what you had to do to cover the O.J. murder trial back in the day.
Man.
I love that story. Are you willing to tell it?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. The day of the verdict, Rick Davis, an African-American photographer here at Fox 10, Rick and I were covering the verdict and flew out to L.A. to cover it. And we're in what was called Camp OJ, across the street from the courthouse in downtown L.A. And that morning, when the verdict was going to come in, this is on the double murder, the original trial in 1994.
Yes.
That stretched into 95. It was October 3rd, I think, 1995.
Which, again, you mentioned it's crazy that he's going to be getting out in October.
Almost to the anniversary of his acquittal.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were in that compound across the street. Charles Ziwi from CNN at the time was next to me at my broadcast position.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, all these cops came around. We were in a fenced off area.
Okay.
They came around before the verdict, about 2 hours before the verdict, and all of a sudden with chains, with links, this big, started chaining up our cyclone fencing that encased that area where we were covering the verdict.
You were probably thinking,
well, I looked
what?
at Rick and I said, they're expecting trouble. They are expecting trouble.
Oh,
and there was a huge crowd gathered across the street from the courthouse and right next to the courthouse. We were across the street. There was a huge crowd gathered right on the sidewalk, and it was getting bigger, and it was taking up the whole street. I thought, they're expecting trouble. And I'm thinking, if this verdict is guilty, we could have real trouble down here. And this is
Riots,
a couple years
right?
after the riots in LA. So there was a lot of angst. Everybody was kind of looking around going, wow, these guys are not messing around.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all these cops come in on horseback. Now they've got the police on horseback. It was a scene out there.
They were really preparing
They were
for
preparing
the worst.
for potential trouble.
Yeah.
And then when the roar went up, when the verdict was not guilty, which I was actually expecting because the jury didn't deliberate. I mean, they deliberated a few hours and said, we've got it. And that's how we were able to fly out, because they said they're going to read the verdict the next day. So I really thought, because the deliberations were short, that it was going to be a not guilty. Because I thought, you can't go through all of that evidence that was given over a 9-month period, I believe, and even just mitigating or anything, and come up with a decision that quickly.
Yeah.
And you've heard the jurors interviewed in the years past, in intervening years, saying that they had watched it every day and they knew where they were by the end of that trial, which was not guilty.
Wow.
But I believed it was going to be not guilty.
Because I remember I asked you yesterday, because some people were shocked, but you said you kind of knew, you had a hunch.
My co-anchor at the time, Robin Garrison, who I sat next to, she said, it's guilty, absolutely. And I said, I don't think so.
Really?
And we had a little wager on it, actually. But,
yeah. I think a lot of people were betting on that. People were betting on this today, too.
So, and I know you've got some tape and we'll show that, but just to give you the background, when the verdict came out, I was watching it just to show you how times change. You would get it on your phone now.
Yeah.
We were watching it on a tiny little television with a little antenna. It was one of these little box TVs with a screen about this big, right?
So 90s.
And everybody was huddled around it, and we were watching the verdict. And I'll tell you, when that verdict came, the roar that went up from that crowd, predominantly African-American crowd, cheering, ecstatic, that finally, in their mind, an African-American man, an African-American suspect, had beat back the predominantly white LAPD and a justice system that had been very harsh on African Americans. There was a feeling, and I interviewed people that day who said, we finally got one. We finally won one. It was about evening the score rather than whether OJ was guilty or not. And it was about sending a message to LAPD as well.
Yeah.
It was classic jury nullification.
Yeah.
They had the facts. There was more than enough there. Forget Furman for a minute. There was more than enough there to say that, the DNA was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
That there is no other reasonable explanation than that O.J. Simpson killed these people, and I believe he did.
And I think that's why it's still
In fact,
today
I have no
such a-
doubt he did.
Yeah.
None.
And that's why today is
And I
still
have
such a
inside
story.
information on this as well from people who travel in his circle.
This is why I have John Hook up here with me, you guys, because he always has inside information, which I love.
Well,
But you know, because you covered it.
I
so you had to talk
I
to
even
everybody.
understand now,
Yeah.
and knew back from a conversation that I had with someone in the sports world about Marcus Allen and that connection between Marcus Allen and Nicole Simpson. That is the thing that set OJ off that night.
Really?
Yes, according to my source,
Because of their relationship and...
Nicole and Marcus Allen were sleeping together.
Okay.
Marcus Allen and O.J. Simpson were very tight. There was a rivalry there,
Yeah.
but they were definitely having relations. And O.J. was like, "Look, we're not together now, and you can have anybody you want, but you're going to pick one of my best friends
Yeah.
to have an affair with." He felt that she was rubbing his nose in it.
Yeah.
So he drove by, my source, OJ drove by her house that night to just check on her, which he did a lot, to see who she was hanging with, and saw
Yeah.
Marcus Allen's car out in front of Nicole's house.
And lost
condo,
it.
And completely lost it. And when I was told this back in 1995, the other person I was with,
Yeah.
we looked at each other, and who's a political figure here in Arizona. We were out on a golf course, actually, when this discussion came up. And we looked at each other and we said, that's the first thing that's made sense. What caused him that night to lose his mind?
See, I thought maybe it was that Ron Goldman was coming over and he thought maybe they were sleeping together and that's what set him
I
off.
don't think that. I believe
yeah.
that Ron Goldman stumbled into that scene at the wrong time.
Yeah. Because everyone has said for years they were just friends. He was just returning glasses.
Yes.
Who knows? But
Well, here's the other thing. He's a young guy. He may have thought, I'm going to return the glasses, and who knows what might happen after that.
Sure, that
That's
makes
how
sense.
a young guy thinks.
Yeah.
Right?
that makes sense.
Right?
Sure.
But there's no evidence that they had anything
Yeah.
romantic going on. But that is the first thing that ever made sense to me about this case.
Has that ever been covered, or that's just something that flies under the radar?
Ironically, and I've told a few people about this through the years, and the source is impeccable. The source is impeccable.
Yeah.
It came out in this recent OJ Made in America. They alluded to it very strongly. Her diary
Really?
talked about Marcus makes me feel beautiful and smart, and they were definitely having something going on. Marcus, under deposition, under oath, said they did not have a sexual relationship. But he was married at the time.
Yeah.
And
What's
who
even-
knows how far he's going to go to try to protect that and not, get involved in the middle of this.
Sure. That makes so much sense.
It totally makes sense. It's a jealous rage killing, and that's exactly what it looked like at the crime scene.
It looked like such a crime of passion with the
But up until that
multiple
point, I
stabbings.
thought, what could have set him off to do this?
Yeah, why
What-
this night? Why
that
now?
night?
Yeah.
Why that night? And so the word is, when he drove by and saw Marcus's car, he went back to Rockingham, got dressed in black, and got a knife and went back to confront them both,
Gosh.
to say, this is BS.
Yeah.
What do you got? He was going to confront them both.
And it happened to be
And when
sadly
when
Ron
he got
Goldman.
back, Marcus had left. This explains the candles on inside and the music playing and the whole bit.
Yeah.
It explains it.
That really makes sense.
No, it did to me.
Yeah.
And the person who shared this story with me is an impeccable source.
And what's interesting too, I've watched documentary after documentary, and they never mention that because of that.
They kind of alluded
they do
to
now,
it in
though.
OJ
Yeah,
Made in
allude to
America.
it.
They
Yeah.
allude to it.
Yeah. I think the older ones didn't because they probably didn't.
But at any rate, so
Yeah.
the day of the verdict, when this all happened, the roar across the street, the roar in the street was deafening, and there was no trouble. There was no trouble at all.
Just cheers.
The not guilty verdict assuaged that crowd, and everybody was cool. And then I looked at Rick Davis, and I said, Rick, after we get out of here, I want to go to South Central Los Angeles and see how the verdict is playing in South Central, where the riot happened.
Good idea.
And I said, I want to go to Normandy and Florence, the intersection where Reginald Denny in his truck was hit with that brick during the riot as he was dragged out of his car. A guy threw a brick at his head. You've seen it.
And that,
It was absolutely violent, horrible.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most
You can't get that
inhumane
image
things
out.
I've ever witnessed. At least, I mean, I was watching it, the coverage on television. It was so, there was no humanity that day when that all started. Anybody who was white was fair game down there. And it was ugly, one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. And so Rick, who's African American, my photographer I was working with, and he kind of looked at me like, you want to go to South Central? I'm like, yes, I do. I think that's where the story is now. I want to know how this is playing in the community, this verdict.
And how that turned out.
Fascinating. Again, a lot of discussion when I was interviewing an African American man at that intersection. And Rick was put in an awkward position because here he is, an African American, hanging with a white reporter.
Sure.
Put in a kind of an awkward spot. And I didn't mean to do that, but I said, Rick, I think we got to go down there. So he's in this position where he may have to, play interference on, what could happen. So we get down there, and this guy, I said to him as I was interviewing him, I said, my friend Rick, who was the photographer, I said, he says that we could be in danger down here. Am I in danger down here? And he said, not with this verdict. And he smiled at me. And I said, so if it had been guilty, and then he went.
That gives me the chills.
Oh, it was incredible.
Just saying that.
It was incredible.
Wow.
It was incredible.
Wow.
It was an amazing experience to be there for that. And then later that day, we decide to head over to OJ's because it took a while to process him and get him out of court and all of that. So we had some time. So then we headed to Brentwood. And Rick and I got up there in a rental car, and Brentwood was sealed off. The cops had sealed it off with big barricades, red and white striped barricades.
Like the whole neighborhood?
The neighborhood, yeah, because reporters had already descended on OJ's house on Rockingham. Mm-hmm. So by the time we got there, they had sealed it off because the neighbors had had enough in Brentwood of all of this spectacle.
I'm sure.
And they didn't want any more looky-loos or reporters or anybody going in. So we get there, and it's sealed off, and I said, oh, God, man, how are we going to get in there? And I'm not kidding. 30 seconds later, I'm looking around. I'm like, how are we going to get in here? Can we walk it? How far? And we're dealing with an old map, right? There's no MapQuest on that.
Right.
Yeah, how far is this to his house? If we hoof it with gear, with tripod and camera, how far are we going to have to go? Is it a mile? Is it 2?
Yeah.
Are we going to have to walk it? Right then, a garbage truck is coming down the street. And I said, Rick, this is our ticket in.
This is the story you guys have been waiting for.
And so we flagged the truck down. And I said, hey, man, are you going into Brentwood? Are you going near OJ's house? He goes, as a matter of fact, we are. I said, can we? And I hand him, I have money in my hand. I had a 20, which in 1994 wasn't bad.
Hey, it's still good now.
1995. Yeah. And I said, can you give us a ride in? And I hand him the money. He goes, sure. Climb on the floor. Get on the floor. So we got down on the floor of this garbage truck. And the barricades opened. The cops opened the barricades, and he rolled right in. Took us right to Rockingham. Took us right to OJ's house.
And so what'd you do? Did you kind of just get out? And
we got out. Well, at that point, you're in. There's nobody there to say you can't be here because all the media's there.
Right.
And one of the things that was an interesting spectacle that day was the ladder. There were several of them outside of OJ's compound where tall ladders where photographers were climbing up on the ladder to shoot down into OJ's yard.
You're kidding.
Yeah, I mean, you had the helicopters going overhead, but you had still photographers trying to get really tight shots.
So people were going to Home Depot and just picking up ladders.
And they were having a party in the backyard, getting ready for OJ to come home. In fact, he might have at that point already been home.
Like his friends and family were having a party in the backyard?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a big soiree. And so someone there, very bright, was renting the ladder. You would pay to climb the ladder and get your shots, and then you'd walk down and somebody else would climb up and go.
Smart guy.
But I think there were also, I seem to remember that I don't think, maybe Rick will correct me on this, but I don't think we paid to climb that ladder. I think by that point there was a network ladder out there that the guy was cool. He's like, you need to get some shots, go ahead.
Yeah. But you would have paid.
There was a time, I know, that somebody was making money with the ladder, and then there were other ladders. But at any rate, that's how you got your shots into OJ's backyard.
I'd love to see a picture of that. You know, just
we've got a picture.
Lined up.
You may see a picture in the story, actually.
Yeah, let's pull that up too. This is the story, and I did get the correct audio on this package now.
Okay.
This is the story that you covered when you.
This was from the day?
This is from the day. I believe this is the one you sent me yesterday.
Oh,
right?
This was kind of a retrospective piece that we did. There'll be some clips of us the day.
Yeah, and then I think I've got
But this is also when OJ's TV made for TV movie, for lack of a better word, last year was running.
Right. So you ran this a month ago, but then you featured the old footage from when you covered
this
it.
was almost a year ago.
Almost
this was May a year ago when all of the OJ specials were coming out.
Okay. So let me pull this up and let's play it for everybody.
October 3rd, 1995, 150 million people, over half the country, tuned in to watch the verdict of the O.J. Simpson murder trial live on television. A drama that captivated the nation. The story consumed us. A trial that lasted nearly a year took a jury less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. Photojournalist Rick Davis and I traveled to Los Angeles to cover the verdict and its aftermath. From the courthouse...
Looks like because it's such old footage, the audio didn't come through correctly.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no,
guys.
there's something wrong in our system because it's only a year old, so it shouldn't be bad. But you'll see in the footage if we want to go to it, and I can talk over it if you want to just take the package.
Yeah, I've got the audio down, so we can talk over this right now.
Okay.
Let me scroll through, and you can tell me.
Okay. Rick and I both were talking, about covering this, and. This story just captivated the nation. There has rarely been, until Tiger Woods, a moment of a fall from grace in celebrity like this. I don't think, I just can't imagine it would be topped. That someone who was this beloved would end up in this situation.
And you brought up a really good point to me yesterday. You said, what about millennials? Do they care about this story? And here we're showing clips from the show that was just released last year on FX. I think that made anybody who might be unfamiliar with the story, which I don't know who would be unfamiliar with the story, that really brought to light again for younger people to understand the story.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got a guy who's beloved. People did not, this is our footage from outside of court, that free OJ. That was...
wow.
That was our footage.
They're on the horses. Yeah, let me go back. Let's take a look. I think it was
the horseback. It was just a circus. It was an absolute, right there.
Is that you?
Officers on horseback, yeah, that's me.
Wow.
And it was just beyond belief that this could be happening. Now, by this point, we were a year into this OJ business, more than a year, because the murders happened in June of 1994. So by this point, we'd all kind of grown accustomed to this story.
Yeah.
That, a lot of people believed he was a killer and the DNA was very strong and all of that. But still, verdict day, even though people had their suspicions about what was going to happen, you didn't know. And this is the guy I credit with letting this whole thing get out of control. It's not credit, it's scorn, probably. I think Lancito really enjoyed the celebrity of all this.
Yeah.
And he let the courtroom become a circus. Not that it may have changed the outcome, because once Furman and the racism was established, that was really a problem for the defense, or for the prosecution. For the defense, it was a gift.
But do you feel like the judge sort of wanted that praise? He sort of wanted people to like his decision? I mean, I know a lot of people said, the judge didn't know what he was doing, that he was overlooking things, that he liked all of the media attention.
Well, it's a trial that probably should have lasted, a month. Instead, it goes on for 9. There's just no reason for that. That's the scene outside of the courtroom.
Let me go back a little bit. That was the scene that day.
Yeah, that was the scene that day. That's our footage going back just a little further.
So there it is.
That's Chris Darden the day of the glove demonstration.
Is he the one that said if the glove don't fit, you must have
No,
quit?
that's Johnny Cochran who made that. But Chris Darden gave him the glove to try on for O.J. Simpson to try on, and just gave the defense a huge
I'd love to hear
boost.
what your thoughts are on that when that happened, when he tried the glove on and stretched
Well,
his
I'm
hand
talking
out.
about, in this interview, I'm talking about that you never, ever, ever, it's one of the tenets of being an attorney. You never ask the question, or there's our footage.
So there
you never
is.
ask the question that you don't know the answer to. And in this case of the glove demonstration, Chris Darden having O.J. Simpson put on the then bloody glove, but dried bloody glove that had shrunk. It was soaked with blood. It shrunk. O.J. wasn't taking his medicine anymore for his arthritis. So now his joints are swelling.
Oh, yeah,
he's an actor,
yeah.
and you're giving him the opportunity in front of a jury to control the situation. And so he's not going to let that glove fit, no matter what they thought.
Right.
And it didn't probably fit anyway because it had shrunk so badly. Any leather product that's been soaked will shrink.
And in a way, it still got on
That's
his
Rick
hand.
Davis. That's the photographer
That you were working with that day.
And Rick still works here. Just a great guy. This moment, you can almost see OJ's heart pounding. I mean, he may have an inkling. Look at Johnny Cochran's reaction. And that was our footage from out in front of the
The
courthouse.
cheers.
Yeah.
Wow.
A deafening roar.
What were some of the signs saying? I know I paused for a second.
Oh, free OJ. Van Adder planted the blood. Furman planted the glove. All this kind of stuff. It was. This guy was. Hey. He was telling me the juice is so fast. You're telling me he can't run away from this situation, and he just did, and he beat the rap, and it's interesting.
Let's see. I don't know if the entire package has the sound a little screwed up, so let's just see real quick if we can hear this correctly.
Did he ever escape a tackle this difficult in football? OJ didn't fumble 4 times in his career. He don't drop a glove, another glove, a hat, socks. That's not OJ. He don't fumble.
Saying that he wouldn't have dropped a glove at the crime scene.
He
dropped
wouldn't
another
fumble,
glove
he wouldn't do that.
at Rockingham. Dropped his knit cap. He's saying that he didn't fumble in football, so he wouldn't have dropped these items.
Was it proven that those gloves were planted, or is that still up for debate?
Come on. Yeah, well, people, it may be up for debate, but let's think about this in a reasonable context. The day of the murders, when Furman went over there, nobody knows what OJ's up to. They don't know if he's in Rockingham or where he is. So without knowing if OJ has an alibi or not, you're gonna deposit a bloody glove behind his house and frame him when he might have a complete alibi that you don't know about?
Yeah,
you haven't even talked to him yet.
Yeah.
He might have been at his girlfriend's house. He might have been out of the country. He might have been anywhere. He might have been asleep at Rockingham with an ironclad alibi. You're going to start
point.
planning evidence before you ever talk to the suspect?
And risk your
There's
life
no
and
way.
risk your career?
There's no way. Absolutely no way.
So yeah, you don't believe that they were planted.
No, it doesn't make sense because you're not going to start planning evidence on a guy who might have an alibi.
Right.
An ironclad alibi.
Yeah.
They didn't know anything yet. They had gone over there on a welfare check to make sure that he was okay. LAPD up until that point had been extremely deferential to O.J. Simpson. They treated him just like a celebrity. He caught many breaks. He knew people in the police department. They were hardly out to get him. He was a friend of theirs.
Yeah, I think he had him over for parties all the time.
His friend Ron Shipp was an LAPD cop.
Yeah.
One of his good friends.
But they really played the race card in this.
No question. No question. I mean, Johnny Cochran played it brilliantly.
Yeah.
But, Johnny Cochran, he gets a lot of grief about this.
Some footage of him.
But Johnny Cochran, his job is to get his client off. That's his job.
Yeah.
And he did it. And he had enough there to create reasonable doubt in that jury.
What about this police chase? What do you think about this?
Well, it was, to me, it was the hallmarks of a guilty person. I think OJ really was thinking that day that he might kill himself. He was also, he had a passport, he had money, and he had a disguise. So he may have been thinking, can I get to Mexico? Can I flee? Can I get out of here?
Yeah.
Then when that kind of crumbled, was he going to take his own life?
Well, yeah, I mean, his lawyers, read his suicide note while he was on this,
Right.
long
Well,
chase.
a goodbye note.
A goodbye note, yeah.
But he also, at the beginning of that goodbye note, says, I did not do this. And he's continued to say that, forever. But the evidence is just overwhelming. As the prosecution has said many times, the evidence, the blood evidence, they said was some of the most blood evidence they had ever had in any case at LAPD. It was that dramatic.
And people have been charged with much less evidence.
This was, it was overkill. Not only the murders were overkill, but the evidence, the mountain of evidence was overkill.
And what about, too, and we talked about this yesterday, the shoes. The shoes from the scene.
Again.
The mark of the Bruno Mali shoes.
Bruno Mali.
He said, "I'd
Sold
never
only
wear those
only
ugly
200
shoes."
some
People
pairs were
own it.
ever sold
Yeah.
in the whole world. And he's saying, I would never wear those ugly ass shoes. And then they produced pictures in the civil trial of him wearing those shoes on the sideline at football games.
That, to me,
And there was a receipt for him. And he said, that's me, but those aren't my shoes. This is the kind of stuff.
This is before we had Photoshop and all those
Yeah.
things that we can do now. We can edit anything.
Right.
I mean, pictures of him wearing the shoes.
Yes.
They're on.
There's no doubt. And the blood trail to the left of his bloody footprints leaving Rockingham, Bundy, that is the cut on his left hand, dripping.
And what did he say? He said he broke a glass, and
In
that's
Chicago.
where the cut came from.
Yeah, but he also told other people that he did it chipping golf balls in his backyard.
So he had two different stories.
There were two different stories. He was telling stories, he was making it up as he went.
Wow. And then today with the parole hearing, he's just been granted parole. Do you think when he got caught in Vegas for this whole memorabilia situation that the judge this time was saying,
Oh, no question.
you're going away
Yeah,
this
this is
time?
going to be a make good. And she sentenced him on the anniversary of the acquittal. It was October 3rd. What would it have been? 2000.
On the very anniversary.
It was on the same anniversary of the acquittal. She's like, okay, and she set the date, and that was the date. And she was going to administer a little street justice to O.J. Simpson. This crime in Vegas really didn't deserve 9 years for O.J. Simpson.
That's what I heard.
Again, this is how weird the justice system can be. He really shouldn't have served much time at all for that. They had offered him a 30-month plea deal.
And he wouldn't take it.
He didn't take it. This crime should have been maybe a year or two. That's it. But
Yeah.
she piled on because she's like, you got away with this before. I'm going to stick it to you now.
Do you think, too, that, he didn't want to take the plea deal because he thought, I got out of the first one, I can get out of this. I don't
Maybe.
need a plea deal. And
Maybe.
she said, okay,
And
now I'm going to show
I think
you.
in OJ's mind, and I do understand this, that if he felt that people were ripping off his stuff that belonged to him, his personal property, was being pilfered and sold out on the black market, that I could see being very upset about that and saying, you know what, there's a right and wrong, a clear right and wrong about that too. And OJ thinking, that is just wrong. So I'm going to get my stuff back. And even if guns are drawn, it's the right thing. I'm just in doing this, right? I can understand that mindset.
Sure.
Where he's like, this is my stuff. This belongs to me. You guys have taken it. You're profiting off it. This is insane. But when the guns got pulled and he's yelling at people, nobody leaves this room, then it's a kidnapping, and it's an armed kidnapping.
Yeah.
So
I'm just surprised, though. I mean, I think it just comes with the mind of being a little cocky after getting off for the murder, and then, because why would you ever go into any situation again with guns, with anything that could be illegal?
Well,
why do that?
OJ, once he left Brentwood, once he left LA and he went to Florida, and I think OJ felt when this was over, when the verdict was over and he had been acquitted, that he could go back to his old life, that everything would pick up as it left off. And what he failed to realize is that the polarizing nature of that verdict, and he was living in a white upper class neighborhood, they did not welcome him back with open arms. He was a pariah. So he goes back to Brentwood and nobody wants him there. He is scorned. People are sneering. They're screaming at him. They're pointing at him. They did not want him in their community. So he was now unwelcome in a place he had lived for many years. he had to go to Florida. There were tax reasons for Florida also, to avoid state taxes.
Okay.
So his money went further in a place like Florida than it would in California. So that also was a reason for the move, and he wanted the sunshine. He wanted to play golf.
Sure.
But the main reason he left Brentwood was because he was no longer welcome there. He was feeling very unwelcome in Brentwood.
I heard too. I mean, like you said, he lost a lot of friends. I know that Robert Kardashian was one of his lawyers. He was really his right-hand man. He stayed at his house for a while. Their friendship ended after, he was acquitted.
I think
He
there were
really
people around him,
distanced
anybody
himself.
with a brain could look at the evidence and say, you know what, I love the guy, but he did this. He
Yeah.
did this. And there is a piece of this that I think is still not been told. And we will not know until O.J. Simpson dies.
What's that?
Brain trauma from football. The fact that he lacked impulse control and a violent temper. I mean, savage beatings of Nicole. Talking about decapitating her boyfriend. He told her that. That was in her diary that was locked in her safety deposit box. He had a violent temper. And this traumatic brain injury from football and other sports where you're repeatedly getting micro
And concussion
and
after concussion.
micro concussions and macro concussions, we may find out down the line that may have been a contributing factor to his inability to control his impulses.
That is such a great point. I didn't even think about that because they've studied that so many times about concussions changing the personality and the
You're changing changing brain chemistry.
You're psychologically different after you suffer
I'm not
that
making
many blows to the
excuses
head.
for him.
Sure.
But it
Yeah.
might explain why he could not contain his anger. Now, there are people who are completely, utterly healthy who can't control their anger. But this may explain, we may find out down the line that this was a factor. If it'll be interesting when O.J. Simpson passes away someday, whether, as many football players have done, they want a deep look at the brain. People have put this in their will and said, I want you to explore my brain and find out what's going on because I'm not right.
Yeah.
Several players have done this, some who've committed suicide. Said, open my head up and look in there and let's learn something from the pain I've gone through. I wonder if we're going to find out down the line if O.J. Simpson ever agrees to do that post-mortem.
Do you think he would agree?
I don't know. In some regards, he's a very bright guy. I wonder if it's ever been suggested to him or if he's thought about it. There may be another piece of this that we don't quite understand.
Yeah, that would be extremely interesting if he allowed that to happen, and we could take a look inside, and that would definitely explain a lot.
If you found out that he had suffered a lot of brain trauma, people, their view of it wouldn't excuse it, but they might go, wow, that could have contributed.
Sure.
His inability to control his rage that night.
It's such a fascinating story. I mean, still today, people are still so drawn to the drama, to the story. I myself, I'm still so drawn to the story.
And you were 4 years old when this happened?
I was around 4 years old, so I don't
When the murder
remember
happened.
a lot. When the murder happened, yeah. When it was all happening, I don't remember a lot. But I remember my parents talking about it and growing up and hearing about it. But I don't remember seeing the chase or anything.
Can I go old school on you for a second?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, in 1994, I was on vacation in Hawaii when this all happened.
Okay.
The day of the murder, I was flying, the day after the murder, I was flying out of LAX to go to Hawaii. And I picked up a morning paper, okay? This is pre...
Cell phones. And
Yeah. And O.J. Simpson's wife was murdered. And I just immediately thought, boy, who would want to kill her? Wow, it never crossed my mind that he might have done it. Because
Really?
I wasn't following his personal life closely enough to know there was a history of spousal abuse.
Right.
Because he had actually been convicted of that one time with Nicole.
Yeah.
And the pictures are pretty horrific of that beating that
I've seen
he
those
delivered
pictures
to her.
and read her diary entries too.
So there was a history there, but it never dawned on me. So now fast forward, I'm in Hawaii, and the only news you get at your hotel in Hawaii is a little newsletter that they print out that's like like this that you get in the morning.
You're kidding.
No, I mean, I guess you could go buy a paper, but I'm in Hawaii on vacation. I don't want to. I want to
Right.
get away from the news for a while.
And what station were you with at the time?
I was at KVOA in Tucson.
Okay.
So I'm in Hawaii now. Imagine the leap of logic I had to make when I was driving back from bodyboarding one day. It was a Friday.
Yeah.
And I'm turning on the radio and listening to ABC News, Network News, and they're like, O.J. Simpson's white Bronco, police, and I'm like, what? So all the in-between I had missed. I had read that his wife had been murdered, and the next thing I know, 5 days later, he's on the run from police in L.A. And I'm driving just going, he did this?
Oh my God.
It was so unbelievable. I mean, my head was going to explode. And I could not wait to get back to the hotel to turn it on and watch this drama.
Were you able to see any of it?
Yes. I mean, the Bronco chase was still happening.
Oh my gosh.
When I got back to the hotel.
Yeah.
And I couldn't turn it off.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just one of those things where if, everybody had kind of been, as the week went on, as I understand it, the people who were following it, you came to kind of go, oh man, OJ probably did this. He probably killed her.
I mean, look, police chase looks pretty guilty.
Every day, it's a new thing. It's OJ being cuffed and questioned. And there's blood turning up that, and there's discussion about some of the evidence they're finding.
Yeah.
But for me, it was mention of his wife, small in the paper, had been found murdered outside of her condo. And I think in that article it said O.J. Simpson was in Chicago.
So you didn't even think. I
didn't even think anything of it. I'm thinking, okay, he didn't even cross my mind.
Sure.
To 5 days later, he's in a Bronco chase with the cops.
And that's when it really clicked for you when you were
I'm
driving?
like, he did this? He killed her? I'm like, you got to be kidding. I couldn't believe it.
That
so I didn't
is
have the
insane.
steps in between to kind of get me there.
Yeah.
And it was just, I could not believe it.
That is a crazy story, just hearing about the chase. I mean, that's why today they still talk about it, why these shows are still coming out. The
Right.
American Crime Story. Watching that show, before they released it on FX, they had so many documentaries coming out, so I just watched all of them.
Right.
Again, I was really young when it happened, so being able to watch all the documentaries, I'm just sitting there shocked by everything.
Well, imagine, like for me, growing up watching him play football for the Buffalo Bills and then at the end of his career for the 49ers, who I grew up as a fan of the 49ers growing up in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
OJ was legendary in the Bay Area. Potrero Hill, where he grew up in San Francisco, grew up a 49er fan and ends up finishing his career there. This guy was a superhero to all of us. I mean, he was the juice. He was an amazing running back. He'd set the single-season rushing record, breaking Jim Brown's record. It was, he could do no wrong. I actually watched OJ play football at SC.
Really?
I would go to a lot of Stanford football games, and it probably had to be 1968.
We'll pull up some more video of him while you're talking
When
about this.
he hit the Trojans, either 67 or 68. Trojans came to Stanford because I went to a lot of Stanford football games because it's right down the street
Sure.
from where I grew up. Watching Jim Plunkett, a future Heisman Trophy winner as well from Stanford, battling O.J. Simpson in that game. And I remember even as a young kid, the first half O.J. didn't do a lot, and everybody's like, he's kind of overrated,
Yeah.
And in the second half, he tore him apart.
Blew everyone away.
He broke a bunch of big runs, and it was like, oh, okay.
That's what he's called
But,
the juice for.
Yeah, I mean, he was, and just articulate and a good-looking guy and a great personality.
Yeah,
and then the movies,
funny.
yeah, and he was a beloved figure. So this would be for you. This would be Tom Brady killing his wife.
Okay, yeah, I was
Yeah,
going to
now
ask you,
can
what's
you
the
imagine
equivalent today? Yeah.
That would be it.
Tom Brady.
Suddenly, Tom Brady's on the run from cops for murdering his wife.
That would
You
shock
would
me.
absolutely be blown away, right?
Yeah.
That's what it would
absolutely.
be like.
And you would think, no, there's no way he did this.
Exactly.
It would be very hard.
You just wouldn't believe it. Somebody, and Brady, Brady elicits, you get a lot of reaction
Yeah,
because he's playing for the Patriots, who are considered kind of the, some people call him the evil empire
Right.
with Belichick. But so somebody like that beloved figure, OJ was probably more beloved than Tom Brady. because Tom Brady has detractors because of Deflategate and all that. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to find
But
an
no, I
analogy,
think that's a
but
good
you know what I'm
equivalent.
talking about. Somebody
Sure.
you would not suspect
Yeah.
being capable of that.
Yeah, because I've watched old footage. He did movies and commercials and everything after his football career where he was hilarious. He had this big personality.
Exactly.
You would never assume he was beating his wife and doing, these things behind the scenes.
Well, and I tweeted today after the decision that, and I've always felt this about OJ, that the one thing that you could take away from him that would kill him is public adjuration. Public
Accept, like he loves that
acceptance,
fame.
the adjuration, the love of the public. I mean, that to him would be the ultimate sentence. I think for a guy like that is a killer for someone like him.
I think, yeah.
And so my point in the tweet that I made today is he's getting out of prison, but he's trading it for another type of prison. The looks, the scorn, the facts, which are inescapable about the double murder, that are so overwhelming. And then the ridicule.
What friends does he have left?
He can never go back and recapture what he had.
Never.
And Tiger Woods has dealt with a little of the same thing.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
That is also
a
fall,
himself.
a major fall from grace.
I was watching The Five last night, and they were saying, unless he did some reality show like the Kardashians, I don't know if anyone would offer. I don't know.
I would never underestimate the power of the public to have curiosity about this guy. There may be another act for him somehow.
People would tune in,
but
whether you love him or
I
hate
guess
him.
the point I was making earlier is when he went to Florida, he really kind of embraced, you talk about Darth Vader, he kind of embraced the dark side. When he went to Florida and he was no longer juice and beloved, he kind of went to a dark place and thought, okay, well, if they think of me that way, I'm going to give it to them. I'm going to be gangster OJ.
Yeah.
And he got into that world. He was out of control. And this is what I do think there is a very high probability that he could reoffend in some way and end up back in prison.
Really?
He's going to have to really keep his nose clean.
Parole,
They made a point today during the hearing. Any misstep, this is all good now, but if you misstep, we're going to revisit this. I just think, and a guy like that, if he goes out to clubs or starts going to bars, and there's drinking involved, it could be even someone else, not him, who's the instigator, who drags him into a situation where he's in a bar fight or a confrontation. Now suddenly he's back in trouble again.
He has to watch his back forever now because there are so many people that would love to see him back in
Oh,
jail.
absolutely. And I would not doubt that there will be many people who would want to bait him into a confrontation.
They try to
There's
sort of
money
frame
to be
him.
made.
Mm-hmm.
There's celebrity that you could attain by being the person who got OJ and threw him back in jail.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of people who would be out there trying to mess with him.
And I wonder what friends he has left and who's really on his team now that he can, because before, like
Can
you said,
can
he
you
was
go
so
back and
loved.
play this for a moment, the Kardashian reaction?
Sure.
This is fascinating.
Where
Watch
is it? Oh, Robert Kardashian's
watch
reaction?
Kardashian's reaction when the verdict comes in.
Is it right? Let me...
Now this is, you can go ahead and roll this because I think any of this footage is interesting.
I'll pause it right when
Yeah,
we find Robert.
that's. I mean, when he was cuffed and all that, I missed all that when that was going on because I was gone. Now watch Kardashian's reaction.
Let me remove the lower third really quickly here. And
This is one of his best friends, one of his
There's
really good
Robert
friends.
Kardashian.
Okay, he had been sticking by OJ. Now watch, the verdict comes in and Kardashian looks not happy.
not happy.
Not happy, but disgusted.
Yeah, see, I think he pats him on the back or gives someone a high five, OJ does, and you can just see Robert
It's-
Kardashian's face.
Oh
Look
yeah,
at
it's
that.
Johnny Cochran slapping OJ on the back, but I think
Yeah.
Kardashian at that point knows the truth. He knows that his friend probably did this, and so he's ambivalent about the verdict.
Yeah, even in the show, The American Crime Story, it shows that their relationship is very strained after that, and he distances himself from him after this. They don't hang out ever again. They
Right.
don't speak ever again, and it's...
And why would that be? Because he knows the truth.
I think, he knows the truth.
Or figured
and-
it out.
And, he felt obligated at the time. It's your friend, and he's, I'm assuming OJ's very persuasive and very, intense when he wants something, and he did his job, but I don't think he wanted to. And I remember at the time, Kris Jenner has said that it really strained their marriage or their relationship.
Oh yeah, because
And
Kris Jenner felt that she knew for sure OJ had done this because of the beatings of Nicole in the past.
She said she had lunch with Nicole the day before she died. They were really close friends. They all four hung out.
And Nicole had really emancipated from OJ. She had moved on. She said, "It's finally over. I'm finally over it. I'm done."
I heard all these stories. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, about how they still kind of slept together sometimes. How he
I don't
watched her
think
through
so
the
in the
window.
last. That's true, but I don't think in the last month or so anything. It had been over for
For a while.
and she was really over it. She was seeing other people, and one of them was Marcus Allen.
Now, she was really young when they met. He met her when she was waitressing. She was, what, not 18, 19 years old,
Yeah.
maybe younger when
Yeah.
he met her. He was a star. Of course she was going to be attracted to him. And
Right, and as the years went on, she, instead of just being kind of tied to him and his celebrity, she started to become her own person.
her own celebrity.
And
Yeah.
and not really celebrity, but just her own. She grew into a woman and
Oh,
developed
sure.
her own personality and her own likes and dislikes, and they might or might not, dovetail with what OJ wants to do. She was becoming her own person,
Yes.
and he probably didn't like it.
I read in a letter that she wrote him about how, he gave her grief when she gained weight from being pregnant, that he was always telling her that she doesn't clean enough, cook enough, always yelling at her for not being more of that, really devoted
Domestic,
wife.
yeah.
And she, like you said, grew into herself, and
Yeah.
that's what caused the rage. But John, thank you so much for
You're
coming
welcome.
up here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I'm still fascinated by it, and I know a lot of people are, and some people are sick to death of it. But it isn't. It's an American Shakespearean drama. I mean, his story is one that has pretty much all the elements of something that's pretty interesting, even though it's tragic.
Yes.
And Fred Goldman, who's a delightful guy, I've met Fred a couple of times when he was working at Nordstrom here in town.
Mm-hmm.
We talked one night about when OJ got sent away to the Nevada Correctional Facility. And he said that he and Kim were driving around one day with Kim's child, his grandchild, in a car, and he was telling me, he said, we were kicking around, what should we send OJ? We need to send him something because he's going to prison, finally. And they sent him a housewarming card.
You're kidding.
Fred told me this story. Said, we sent him a housewarming card, said, hope you enjoy your new place.
What?
Hope you have a long, association with it.
Was this reported on?
And I doubt it. But
I
Fred
never
told me
had-
one night, he said, yeah, we kicked it around. We got to send him something. And they sent him a note, a housewarming card, greeting card,
Wow.
to welcome him to his new residence,
Little home,
which was
which is jail.
prison.
Wow.
And I don't blame him in the least.
No.
The pain that is constantly with him.
Oh, he received
He
no
loved
justice for so long.
His son, Ron.
That was, hearing from his dad, Ron Goldman's dad, was so sad.
And just a really, Fred Goldman's a really decent guy, and he just has been through an incredible ordeal with that. I mean, his son's life cut short, and then to be wrapped up in this whole spectacle.
Well, and two, I feel as though Ron didn't get enough attention. Nicole got a lot of attention
That's true.
when she passed away, and Ron was sort of an afterthought almost in some of the discussions. It was Nicole, but Ron was also murdered, and his father was just trying to get him justice, and
Right.
he had such a hard time. And
By the way, when I visited Bundy a couple of times, one time during the coverage of the verdict, we
Yeah.
went over there. And once again, in 2000, I went by it again to see what was going on. I was there to cover the Democratic National Convention in L.A. at the Staples Center. We drove by there one night just to see what had happened because I'm like, it's been a few years since I've been there. I want to see what it looks like.
sure.
But the one thing that I always came away from at that condo was that front yard, which on TV looked like a normal, it's a condo, but when I saw it, I could not believe how tiny this area with fencing was. And my immediate thought was Ron Goldman in that cage with a guy, a strong guy, OJ, with a very sharp knife. And I thought, man, he had nowhere to go. There was no way to get out of this. He was caged in like an animal.
Yeah.
And there was no way to escape it. And they talked about this a little bit on the OJ Made in America as well. And it was so true. When I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, this is Tiny. He had nowhere to go, nowhere to get away from this monster.
He was so young and he was just returning glasses, and that's what he comes. That would be terrifying. Anyone with a knife, but OJ, who's huge, so much more powerful than you are, and he stabbed him so many times.
Yeah, and taunted him with cuts on his cheeks.
Yeah.
He had the knife and he was doing this, talking to him before this all happened.
Oh, really?
That's what they believe.
The markings.
He had markings, like he had the knife around him, and was had his arm around his throat and the knife, and he had the knife to him and was poking him like, "What are you doing here?
Yeah.
What do you think you're up to?"
Oh my God.
Before this got completely out of hand.
Man, and Nicole too. Nicole's completely.
Yeah, I mean, just almost severed her head.
Yeah.
That's how vicious it was. This is what I say a rage killing.
Yeah, a random
It's
person.
an absolute rage killing.
Doesn't do that. Yeah.
So
It's a really sad story, but again, I love having you up here because you covered that extensively, and it's always great to hear your experiences in this. It's
it's something I spent a lot of time thinking about and being part of, I guess, in a small way. But being out there in LA, that was I'll never forget it.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
You got it.
Have a good show today.
Okay, thanks.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fox News Now stream. That was Fox anchor John Hook up here with me describing his experiences when he covered the O.J. Simpson murder trial, as well as discussing the breaking news today of O.J. Simpson getting parole in Nevada. He has been granted parole. He will be released as early as October. We're going to start covering some other stories here in the show today, but we thank you for watching with us live here on the Fox News Now stream for this coverage. We're going to take you to some other breaking news events. It does look like we're going to be getting a press conference soon, so I'm going to have to get with my producer and see where this press conference is taking place, if it's OJ related or if it's something else. I'll be sure to stream that for you guys. Again, though, if you missed the OJ Simpson parole hearing today, his reaction, the press conferences after, reaction from his lawyer, I have that all clipped. Just head to the video section on our YouTube page, search for Fox 10 Phoenix. You can find all of those parole hearing moments clipped there, as well as we'll be live on the 5 o'clock and the 6 o'clock and, of course, 9 o'clock tonight on the broadcast Fox 10 Phoenix to report all the details for you guys. But right now I'm going to give you a live look of the White House while I pull up the next top story. Thanks for watching.